Hey guys, in today's video, I bring you an unbelievable and chilling story. Let's meet Holden Marlowe, a skeptical financial analyst who, after a serious car accident, had a near-death experience that completely transformed his worldview. Holden floated outside his body, encountered beings of light and received impactful revelations about the purpose of life and great spiritual transformations that are about to happen. What he saw on the other side will leave you speechless. So, before we start, leave your like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any content like this, and activate the bell to receive all notifications. Now, get ready for this intense and surprising journey. My name is Holden Marlowe, and until recently, I was the typical skeptic. Not the kind of quiet skeptic, but the kind who rolled his eyes whenever someone mentioned spirituality, life after death, or anything that defied cold, concrete logic. I was a financial analyst in Austin, Texas, and my world was all about numbers, graphs, and economic forecasts. My life was predictable, controllable, just how I liked it. My days always started the same way. The alarm would go off at 5 in the morning and I would get up immediately with no time for laziness. Bitter black coffee was my fuel, and the city's morning traffic was just another graph to navigate. I spent more time in front of computer screens than talking to people, and when he talked, he did so in a practical and direct way. Work always came first, and financial success was my yardstick to measure the value of life. Accounts of spiritual experiences, miracles, or life after death seemed to me just narratives invented to comfort the weak. My own mother, Evelyn, was a person of faith. When she passed away, I felt nothing but emptiness. For me, death was the end, and any attempt to make sense of it was just a human defense mechanism. I was the guy who avoided deep conversations, who stopped talking when someone talked about purpose or destiny. If it couldn't be measured or proven, then it wasn't worth my time. And this narrow view of the world served me well, until my own life was turned upside down. Today, sitting here, I know how wrong I was. And if you're willing to listen, I want to share how a car accident took me to the brink of death and brought me back with a completely different outlook on life, a sight I would never have imagined possible. That morning, tiredness had already become my natural state. The nights were filled with intense, vivid nightmares, as if I were living in another world while I slept. I dreamed of tsunamis swallowing cities, fires consuming forests, and the sky dyed red by violent storms. I would wake up in the middle of the night, my heart racing and sweat running down my forehead. But even these signs weren't enough to break through my skepticism. I convinced myself it was just the stress of work and modern life, a combination of insomnia, poor diet, and pent-up anxiety. That morning, I was no longer myself. My eyes burned from lack of sleep, and my mind was foggy. As I drove down I-35 toward downtown Austin, the city felt blurry, like I was seeing the world through a veil. The cars around me moved in slow motion, and I couldn't focus on the traffic lights. I don't remember the exact moment I fell asleep at the wheel. One moment, I was blinking heavy eyes, trying to shake off the exhaustion, and the next, the world exploded in a cacophony of sounds and lights. The impact was overwhelming. The sound of metal twisting, glass breaking, and the pain tearing through my body were indescribable. My car spun across the track, and everything around me became a blur of chaos. When everything stopped, I was trapped in the wreckage. The pain was so intense that my brain seemed unable to fully process it. The metallic taste of blood filled my mouth, and I could barely breathe. I tried to move my arms, but they were stuck. My legs tingled, a frightening feeling of disconnection. It was then that I saw a face appear in the broken car window. A woman, her blue eyes full of calm and determination. "You're going to be okay. I'm here," she said, her voice a ray of hope in the middle of that nightmare. Later, I would learn that this was Fiona Harper, a nurse who, by pure coincidence or fate, was passing by the place. But at that moment, his words were all that kept me from falling into complete darkness. The ambulance arrived quickly, but time seemed to have become a shapeless mass, now dragging along, now accelerating dizzyingly. I barely registered the faces of the paramedics, just flashes of uniforms, gloved hands, and the incessant sound of sirens. Each jolt of the stretcher made me groan involuntarily, the pain invading my body like an electric current. My vision fluctuated between light and dark, the faces around me distorted, as if they were made of wax melting under a bright light. "Stay with us, Marlowe," I heard a male voice, firm and determined. But the cold sensation was relentless. It started in the extremities and soon took over my entire body, as if my very essence was being erased. My mind wandered between fragments of disjointed thoughts. I found myself walking down office hallways, the monitors flashing red graphics, the phone ringing off the hook. In another moment, I was on my mother's lap, smelling the soft scent of her perfume, a childhood memory that appeared without warning. But soon everything dissolved, and the real world came back with force, dragging me to the edge of the abyss. The scariest thing was the knowledge that I was dying. It was not just an abstract fear, but an absolute certainty. My body didn't respond, my heart seemed to beat in distant echoes. And then, something inside me gave way. The pain disappeared, the cold is gone, and, in its place, a lightness came over me. It was as if gravity had lost its effect. Suddenly, all the noise, the despair, the sound of machines and distressed voices became just a distant background. I was no longer the broken man on that gurney. I was something beyond the body, beyond the pain. It was the beginning of the transition, the point where tangible reality blended with the unknown, and everything I thought I knew about life and death began to unravel. The feeling of lightness was indescribable. It was as if I had freed myself from a weight I had carried for so long that I no longer knew it existed. I floated above the operating table, seeing everything from an impossible perspective. Below, my body was still pale, wrapped in tubes and wires. Doctors and nurses moved quickly, their expressions thick with urgency. "We're losing him," a male voice echoed, cutting through the surreal silence of my new state. I should have felt fear, panic perhaps, but what enveloped me was absolute serenity. My physical body just felt like an empty cocoon, a lifeless shell. I was more than that pile of flesh and bones. I was pure consciousness, a presence that saw and felt without eyes, without skin, without limits. I watched the monitors around me. Vertical lines drew irregular patterns, and the continuous sound of the heart monitor seemed to mark the rhythm between the two worlds. A nurse wiped my bloody face with gentle hands, and I could hear her thoughts, a silent prayer that I wouldn't die. The connection was so deep that I almost felt the warmth of his compassion like a hug. The operating room, once cold and clinical, now seemed bathed in soft light, as if a golden mist enveloped everything. Time did not exist in the conventional way. Minutes, seconds, everything mixed together. I could stay there forever, just watching, just being. But then, something changed. The surrounding light began to pulse, and a presence took shape. I turned around, or maybe I just thought about turning around, and saw figures that defied logical description, beings of light, tall and imposing, made of pure energy that vibrated in waves. They had no faces, but their presence conveyed a sense of security and unconditional love. I knew, without needing words, that they were there for me, that this was just the beginning of a greater journey, and that I was not alone. They were there to guide, to reveal, to transform, and I, the convinced skeptic, felt my inner world opening up to the impossible. Beings of light floated around me, their translucent forms radiating a soft, welcoming energy. There were no words in the traditional sense, but thoughts and feelings hit me like waves. Each pulse of light carried a message, a truth that took root directly in my consciousness. It was as if every cell of my being absorbed that silent communication. "You are safe," the message reached me, accompanied by a feeling of warmth and welcome. "Don't be afraid. There is still much to do on Earth." These words echoed not just in my mind, but in my entire being. It was as if I was being reprogrammed. Every belief, every doubt being gently dissolved in their presence. The surrounding light began to expand, and suddenly I was floating above the city of Austin. The cityscape stretched beneath me, but not in the conventional way. I saw not only the streets and buildings, but also the invisible connections that linked everything and everyone. Thin threads of light connected people, trees, animals, an energetic web that pulsed in a harmonious rhythm. I could feel people's emotions. A woman on a cramped bus felt a deep sadness, and that sadness echoed like a low note in the melody around me. A man hugging his son radiated a joy so pure I could almost touch it. There was an interconnectedness to everything, and for the first time in my life, I understood what it truly meant to be connected to the whole. Among the sensations, a telepathic voice stood out, a greater presence that seemed to encompass not only space but also time. Love is all that matters. You must be like a child, free from judgment and prejudice. These words carried a weight I had never experienced before. I was flooded with a profound understanding that love, true unconditional love, was the foundation of all existence. And then, as I floated above the city, I felt a gentle pull, a force that pulled me to a new level of understanding. Something told me I was about to see more, to delve even deeper into the hidden truth of life. Suddenly, my own life began to unfold before me, not as a fuzzy memory, but as a vivid, detailed experience. I wasn't just watching my own moments, I was reliving them. Every sensation, every emotion, every thought returned with stunning clarity. I saw myself as a child, running through the garden of my childhood home. My mother, Evelyn, watched me with that warm smile, the same smile I thought I had forgotten after her death. I felt the warmth of the sun on my skin again, the smell of the flowers and the sound of her laugh, a crystal clear laugh that always made the world feel safe. However, alongside the happy memories, there were also painful ones. I saw myself as a teenager, turning away from her, refusing her comfort after my father's death. I saw the pain in your eyes when I said that God was just a human invention for the weak. The life review was not a conviction. There was no judgment, just understanding. I was driven to relive moments when my actions, big or small, impacted others. I saw the waiter I barely thanked, the coworker I had to humiliate to secure my promotion, and even Fiona, the nurse, in a past moment, when I bumped into her in a cafe and didn't even look in her direction. Every act of indifference seemed to create little shadows around me, while every gesture of kindness sparkled like stars. And then she appeared, my mother, rejuvenated, enveloped in the same light that emanated from the beings around me. His features were soft, but his eyes carried a depth impossible to describe. "You have always been loved," she said, not with words, but with that direct communication that took place from soul to soul. Even when you closed yourself off from the world, love was always with you. Her presence was like a balm for all my internal wounds. I felt the weight of years of skepticism and bitterness dissolve. She didn't scold me. She just enveloped me in absolute understanding. "Big changes are coming," she warned me. "You have an important role. You need to help people prepare." The connection between us was so deep that, for a moment, I thought I would never come back. I wanted to stay there, in that eternal embrace, but I knew my journey was just beginning. There was a mission to accomplish, and the love I felt now needed to be shared with the world. The light around me intensified, and everything I knew as reality began to dissolve. I felt myself being pulled into an even deeper dimension, where the very concept of time seemed to non-exist. It was like diving into an infinite ocean of light, where every particle vibrated with a frequency of unconditional love. It was not just a light that I saw with spiritual eyes, but a presence that I felt in every part of my consciousness. There, in the center of that sea of light, a greater presence manifested itself. It was not an anthropomorphic figure. It did not have a face or a defined shape. It was simply a presence, a divine consciousness that enveloped everything at once. The feeling was like being in front of a source of primordial energy, something that was beyond words, beyond human understanding. He was what many could call God, but without the limitations and concepts imposed by religions. As I approached, I felt as if my very soul was being laid bare. There were no more masks. There were no more defenses. I was just essence, a point of light in the midst of infinity. And yet, even though I was so small in the face of that immensity, I felt completely welcomed. It was as if every fiber of my being was loved, accepted and understood without judgment. It was in this state that the revelations began. Images and feelings flooded my consciousness. I saw our planet as a living sphere, pulsing with energy. I saw how each act of kindness created waves of light that reverberated across time and space. But I also saw shadows, formed by indifference, hatred, and human disconnection. The divine presence showed me visions of the future, not as rigid predictions, but as potentials. I saw natural disasters, tsunamis, earthquakes, hurricanes, sweeping parts of the world. I saw people lost, desperate, searching for meaning in the midst of chaos. But in contrast, I also saw a growing light, a wave of spiritual awakening, where people began to reconnect with love, with compassion, with the truth that we are all one. Humanity will face a great spiritual impact. The message reached me, imbued with urgency. But the key to getting through these times will be love. Only through compassion and unity will it be possible to cross the darkness and find the light. I felt small, but at the same time, part of something big. I knew it wasn't a message just for me, but for everyone. And I understood that my mission, upon returning, would be to share this truth, take this message to the world, not through empty words, but by living it fully. Visions of the future continued to unfold before me, each scene more vivid and impactful than the last. I wasn't just watching, I was part of it, as if my consciousness navigated the possibilities of what was to come. The planet seemed like a living entity, breathing and suffering with every human action. The catastrophes I saw were not just natural phenomena, but responses to a profound imbalance between humanity and nature. I saw myself flying over oceans that were revolting. Giant waves rose like walls of water, swallowing coastal cities. The roar of the waters was deafening, but what affected me most were people's emotions. I could feel the fear, the despair, the loss. Each soul seemed to emit a silent scream that reverberated through the planet's own energy. I saw the earth shake. Buildings crumbled like houses of cards, and the ground opened up, swallowing everything in its path. Storms swept the world. The sky darkened, and the wind carried not only destruction but also a clear message. Something needed to change. Yet amid this apocalyptic vision, there was hope. I saw people coming together, reaching out to each other. Entire communities were rebuilding themselves, not just physically but spiritually. Religious, cultural, and social differences seemed insignificant compared to the need for survival and renewal. It was as if, deep in the chaos, humanity finally woke up to what really mattered. I saw world leaders and scientists working side by side, no longer driven solely by profit or power, but by a genuine desire to restore balance to the planet. Innovations emerged. Green technologies flourished, and slowly, the world began to regenerate. I saw the clean oceans, the purest air, the forests being reborn. It was a vision of a possible future, a promise of what could be achieved if love and compassion became humanity's compass. And above all, the message remained clear and constant. Love is the key. With every scene, with every vision, this truth echoed like a mantra, reaffirming that only through unconditional love could humanity transcend the darkness and embrace the light. The intensity of the visions enveloped me completely, but I knew it wasn't the end yet. Something inside me said that I needed to go back, take this message with me, and share this truth with those who didn't yet know it. Suddenly, I felt a force pulling me back. The lightness that enveloped me was replaced by a crushing weight. It was as if I were being sucked into a whirlpool, dragged from the light dimension into the confines of my own body. The transition was brutal. The welcoming warmth gave way to a cold, suffocating feeling. Limitless consciousness collided with physical limitations. When I opened my eyes, everything was a blur. Fluorescent lights flickered above me, monitors beeped, and voices echoed around me. I was in the ICU. The pain returned with a vengeance, an overwhelming wave that coursed through every nerve in my body. My head was pounding, and each breath felt like a monumental effort. "He's back," I heard someone exclaim, and a mixture of relief and amazement filled the room. The faces of the nurses and doctors were a combination of tiredness and hope. I could barely move. My body was attached to tubes and machines. My chest rose and fell erratically, and my vision fluctuated between light and dark. "Holden, can you hear me?" a female voice asked softly. It was Fiona Harper, the nurse who helped me at the scene of the accident. His face was a point of stability in the midst of chaos. She held my hand, and for the first time, I felt human warmth in a completely new way. It wasn't just physical contact, it was a spiritual connection. The physical pain was intense, but there was something even more challenging going on inside me. My mind struggled to process what I had experienced. The vision of catastrophes, the encounter with beings of light, the message about love. Everything seemed as real as the hospital room I was in now. But how to explain that? How could I bring to the physical world an experience that transcended everything I knew? Every beat of my heart felt like a knock on the door between the two worlds. And while my body struggled to recover, my soul knew its true journey was just beginning. I needed to find a way to share what I experienced. even if no one believed it. Because now, more than ever, I knew that the message I received was not just for me, but for everyone. The next few days were a blur of pain and discomfort. My body was broken, literally. Multiple leg and rib fractures, internal injuries that required complex surgeries, and a recovery that seemed endless. Every movement was a cruel reminder of the fragility of the human body. Physiotherapies were a mix of physical suffering and mental discouragement. There were times when I wanted to just give up, let my body give in and return to that welcoming light, but something inside me didn't allow it. It was as if the message I received during the NDE had taken root in my soul, a seed of purpose that refused to die. Love is the key. That phrase repeated in my mind like a mantra, pulling me out of the shadows whenever I fell into despair. During my recovery, Fiona Harper became more than just a nurse. She was a friend, a confidant, and, at many times, my only connection to the outside world. His calm demeanor and natural spirituality helped me find some balance. She didn't judge me when I talked about what I had seen. Instead, her eyes shone with understanding, as if she already knew that there was much more to life than physical reality. I also started meeting with Dr. Elaine Truitt, a trauma psychologist. At first, I thought it would be useless. After all, what could she understand about such an unusual experience? But your questions, always careful and respectful, opened a safe space for me to explore what I experienced. She encouraged me to write, to meditate, and to seek answers beyond the limits of my former skeptical vision. My best friend, Caleb Whitmore, was one of the biggest challenges. Skeptical as I was before, he viewed my transformation with suspicion. "Holden, you've suffered trauma. This could just be your brain trying to deal with everything," he would say, always trying to bring logic to the inexplicable. But, interestingly, his skepticism helped me reinforce my own faith. Each time I needed to explain what I felt, each time I needed to defend my experience, the message became clearer and stronger within me. The physical recovery was slow, but the spiritual transformation occurred in an overwhelming way. I read everything I could find about near-death experiences, spirituality, unconditional love. I didn't limit myself to one religion or tradition. I wanted to understand the universal truth, the essence that connected all spiritual visions to love and compassion. And so, even before I left the hospital, I knew that my life would never be the same again. The skeptical, rational man who got into that ambulance had been left behind. What was reborn now was someone who understood the true purpose of life, to share love, practice compassion, and help as many people as possible prepare for what was to come. When I was finally released from the hospital, the world seemed different. It wasn't the streets of Austin that had changed, but my own view of them. The sunlight seemed brighter, the trees more alive, and each person who crossed my path seemed to carry a hidden story, a divine spark. The process of adapting to everyday life was challenging. My body still bore the scars from the accident, and each step was a painful achievement. But the real challenge was finding a way to share my experience without sounding like a lunatic. How can I explain such an intense spiritual journey to people who, like me before, lived trapped in the logic of the material world? At first, I started slowly. During a casual conversation with Fiona, I told her about the visions. She was the first person to hear the complete story, from the moment I left my body to the revelations of the light beings. His reaction was a mix of surprise and acceptance. "I've always believed there's more beyond what we see," she said, her voice soft as a caress. "Maybe your mission is to help others see this too." With Fiona's support and ongoing sessions with Dr. Elaine Truitt, I began to share my experience with a small circle of friends and family. Caleb, my best friend, was resilient. He listened to me with his arms crossed, his expression skeptical. "Holden, you almost died. Your brain was under extreme stress. Don't you think this could have just been a hallucination?" I didn't judge him. In fact, I understood perfectly. It was like I was talking to an old version of myself. "Maybe, Caleb, but what I felt, what I saw, it wasn't just a vision, it was a truth that doesn't fit within the limitations of our logical understanding." Little by little, my story began to spread. I was invited to speak at small spiritual groups, then at community centers. What surprised me was how my message touched people. Some were crying. Others came to me with questions, seeking hope and comfort. I always reinforced that I didn't bring definitive answers, but just the truth that I lived. Love is the key. Public response was mixed. There were those who embraced my message fervently, but there were also skeptics, critics, and even those who accused me of opportunism. I understood everyone. I wasn't there to convince anyone, but to share what I had experienced and, perhaps, plant a seed of reflection. As time passed, I felt my mission become clearer. It was not about creating a movement or a doctrine, but about touching hearts, one at a time. And as the world around me began to show the first signs of the changes I had seen during the NDE, my urgency grew. I knew that time was short, and that many souls still needed to awaken. As the end of the month approached, the sense of urgency within me only increased. It was as if a silent countdown was underway, a steady beat that only I could hear. It wasn't fear, but an unshakable certainty that great changes were about to happen. And my mission now was to make sure as many people as possible were prepared, not just physically, but spiritually. I began to intensify my efforts. I organized community meetings, participated in spiritual support groups, and even recorded some short videos sharing my experience. I know many of you might not believe it, I said, looking directly into the camera, but I need to share this. I saw what's coming, and as scary as it may seem, love is the key to getting through what's to come. Fiona was still by my side. Her support was unwavering. Together, we organized small gatherings at his home, where people came to hear my story and share their own stories. It wasn't just about my experience, but about creating a safe space where everyone could express their doubts, fears, and hopes. With each meeting, I felt that an invisible network of light and love grew around us, connecting each person present. Caleb, despite his initial skepticism, began attending these meetings. "I still don't understand all this, Holden," he admitted one night after one of the meetings, "but I can't deny the impact his message has had on people, and maybe even in me." His words were a silent victory, a confirmation that even the most closed heart could be touched. At the same time, signs of the changes I had seen during the NDE began to manifest themselves. News of extreme weather events emerged every day: floods, unexpected storms, sudden changes in temperature. But there were also stories of hope, communities coming together to help each other, strangers offering shelter and food, local leaders promoting initiatives of compassion and solidarity. I knew the real test was just beginning. It wasn't about surviving the physical events, but about how our souls would react to them. And my message needed to be clear: practice compassion, open your hearts, and face the unknown without fear. Love is the key. With the end of the month approaching, I intensified my messages. I recorded a final video, a kind of appeal to the world. No matter what happens in the next few days, remember, love is the answer. Be kind, be brave, and above all, be a light to those who still walk in darkness. In the silence that followed after sending that video, I felt a deep peace. I had done everything I could. Now, all that was left was to trust in love and hope that the seeds planted would flourish, even in the midst of the approaching storm. The last days of that month arrived like a silent wave. The sky seemed grayer, the air charged with an invisible tension. It wasn't just the weather, it was something deeper, a vibration in the air, a collective feeling that something was about to happen. I woke up every morning with my heart racing, as if my body was responding to a call that came from beyond this world. The news continued to show extreme weather events, and the internet was buzzing with theories and predictions. Some talked about the end of times, others sought scientific explanations for the phenomena, but few seemed to understand that the true change was not just physical, but spiritual. I knew my mission was to keep the message clear and simple. Love was the key, and compassion was the way. That morning, as I was drinking my coffee in silence, my phone started ringing off the hook. Messages arrived from all sides. People who participated in my meetings, old friends, strangers who had watched my videos. "Holden, I feel what you said. My family is more united than ever. People on my street are helping each other, sharing food and offering shelter. You were right. We need to stay strong and united." Fiona arrived shortly after, bringing with her the same serenity as always. "People are really listening to you," she said, her blue eyes shining with a mix of wonder and hope. "You did more than just tell your story. You helped people find the love within themselves." We decided to organize a meeting that night, a moment to meditate, pray, and strengthen the network of love and compassion that we had been building. The room was packed. Some people were crying. Others were holding the hands of strangers, all united by the same feeling that the moment was crucial. As I spoke, a deep calm enveloped me. It wasn't just my voice anymore. It was as if I was channeling something greater, allowing the light and love I had experienced during the NDE to flow through me. It doesn't matter what happens out there. What matters is what we carry inside, I said, touching my own chest. And if love guides our steps, there is no darkness that can stop us. That night, while the world outside seemed to descend into chaos, inside that room there was only light. And I knew without a shadow of a doubt that the message had found its way. Now, all that was left was to trust that, when the storms passed, love would blossom among the rubble, bringing with it a new era of compassion and hope. The days that followed were both devastating and inspiring. While the world was going through a sequence of extreme weather events, with violent storms, floods, and unexpected cold in places where winter should have already stopped, I saw at the same time a silent and powerful movement of love spreading. The news showed destruction, but it also showed hope. In small communities and large cities, people helped each other without expecting anything in return. Neighbors who previously barely greeted each other now shared food and clothing. Aid organizations emerged overnight, made up of volunteers who brought not only supplies, but also comfort and welcome. Fiona and I were at the center of this web of love in Austin. Our home became a gathering place for those seeking not only physical shelter, but also a safe space to process what they were feeling. We organized meditation circles, moments of prayer and long conversations around the fireplace, where stories of overcoming and everyday miracles were shared. Caleb, my skeptical friend, was now one of the movement's biggest enthusiasts. He helped me organize meetings, brought new people, and, surprisingly, his questions and his practical way of seeing things helped those who were still struggling to accept what was happening. "I don't know if I believe all this," he told me one night as we carried boxes of food to a nearby community. "But I believe in what I see, and what I'm seeing is love, pure and simple." Dr. Elaine Truitt also got involved. She began leading group sessions, helping people process the trauma of loss, but always guiding them back to the main message. Love is the key. His approach, which mixed psychology with spirituality, brought relief and clarity. Meanwhile, I continued sharing my message. I recorded new videos, wrote articles, and participated in online conversations. It was no longer just my story. It was the testimony of thousands of people who, in the midst of chaos, were finding a greater purpose. The message spread like wildfire in a dry field, and for the first time, I no longer felt alone. I knew that what I had experienced during my NDE was not just a personal vision, but a glimpse of what humanity could be. And as the world began to stabilize, the love we saw blooming around us was proof that even in the most difficult circumstances, light always finds a way to shine. When the world finally seemed to breathe a sigh of relief after the storms and natural disasters, I also felt an internal relief. It was not just the end of physical catastrophes, but the beginning of a new spiritual era. I saw it in the little things, in the way people smiled at each other, in the renewed patience in traffic, in the small gestures of kindness that now felt as natural as breathing. My own transformation was evident. The skeptical, pragmatic man I had been before the accident seemed like a distant memory. Now, every conversation I had, every look I exchanged with a stranger, carried a depth I hadn't known before. I became, without planning, a messenger of love, but not in the religious or doctrinal sense. My message was simple: love, and let love guide every choice. Fiona and I continued to organize get-togethers, but now they had a lighter tone. It was no longer about preparing for the worst, but celebrating the best. People shared stories of reconciliation, everyday miracles, and how the message of love had transformed their lives. I felt that each word shared created a new wave of light, expanding that invisible network of compassion that I had seen during my NDE. Caleb, to my surprise, began leading some of these meetings. His practical vision and direct manner helped those who still had doubts or fears. "I may not have lived what Holden did," he said, "but I've seen what love can do, and honestly, that's more than enough for me." Dr. Elaine Truitt also stood by our side. offering guidance and psychological support to those still struggling to find their emotional balance. She said our little community was a living example of how trauma could be transformed into growth, how pain could be fertile soil for the soul to flourish. I continued sharing my story, but now with an even greater focus on the power of unconditional love. I was invited to speak at schools, churches, and even companies, where my message helped build more welcoming and compassionate environments. Every opportunity was a chance to reinforce that simple and profound truth. Love is the key. And, at the end of each day, when the silence of the night took over, I allowed myself to close my eyes and revisit that place of light where it all began. I knew that one day I would return there, but until that moment came, my mission was clear: to be a light in the world, help others find their own spark, and spread love wherever I went. Now, looking back, I see clearly how profound my transformation was. From a skeptical and closed-off man to a spiritual messenger, my journey was not just about surviving the accident, but about being spiritually reborn. The old Holden Marlowe, financial analyst, pragmatic and rational, had given way to someone who saw beyond appearances, who heard beyond words, and who felt beyond physical barriers. The message I received during my near-death experience became the foundation of my life. Love is the key. These words echoed in everything I did, in community meetings, in conversations with strangers, and especially in quiet moments with myself. I became a more present, more compassionate person, where before I saw only numbers and logic, now I saw connections, stories, and purpose. My work as a financial analyst was left behind. Now my mission was to carry out what had been revealed to me. I continued writing, recording videos, and speaking at events, but never as a guru or someone who held all the answers. I was just a man who was lucky enough to glimpse the other side, and who felt an immense responsibility to share that vision with the world. Fiona became my partner in this mission. Together, we created a spiritual and emotional support center where people could share their experiences, seek comfort, and find a welcoming community. Fiona's home, which once hosted small gatherings, was now a vibrant space, full of life and hope. Caleb and Dr. Elaine Truitt have also become pillars of this movement, each contributing their own skills and perspectives. As natural catastrophes began to abate, the world entered a period of reconstruction. But it wasn't just a physical reconstruction. There was a collective healing movement, a desire to do things differently, to put love and compassion at the center of decisions. I saw it in small ways: people helping neighbors, communities organizing support events, leaders discussing sustainable and inclusive solutions. Ultimately, my mission was not just to warn about coming transformations, but to help people navigate them with an open heart. And in doing so, I was also healing, transforming, fully living the message I was given. As the world continued on its way, with ups and downs, I knew I had fulfilled part of my purpose. And, even though I knew that my earthly journey would have an end, I no longer feared death, because now I knew that on the other side there was light, there was love, and that the true purpose of everything was simply to be that light, to live that love, and to share that truth with everyone around me. Now, as I close this story, my invitation is simple: open your heart, live love, be the change that the world needs. And if you ever find yourself in the dark, always remember, love is the key. If you like this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.